Good evening.
This is Carol. Oh, go ahead, Thaddeus. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. This is Thaddeus Howze and Carol Bluestein. And we're going to be talking about climate change today. And we're not going to talk about climate change the way most people talk about climate change, as this awe-inspiring, gymongous, impossible to understand kind of thing, because when you do that, most people tune out. And we don't want you to tune out today. What we want you to do is to listen. So we're going to break it down into smaller pieces. Now, what I chose to do was to break it down into what the ancient alchemists called the elemental aspects of the universe. Ancient alchemists believed that air, earth, fire, and water were everything. Everything in the universe was made of these four things. Now, granted, these were very primitive times, and they didn't have chemistry, and they didn't have science the way we do. So they were just making stuff up as they went along. And as stuff went, this was pretty good stuff. For a long time, all of our worldview was tailored through these perspectives. And as science grew more progressive, eventually these ideas fell away. But underneath, the basic premise was a good and sound one. So what we hope to do today is to look at climate change through the eyes of those ancient alchemists and talk about how the destruction of our environment, which is a terrible thing, doesn't mean the end of the world. It just means the end of us. And how we choose to deal with it will be addressed through each elemental aspect. So today, we're going to talk about water, because basically without water, none of the other things matter. Water is the source of all life on Earth. That is significant. Yes, there are some things that don't use it, but we're not talking about them. Viruses don't really count. They're not really alive. And even they need water to do their job. So everybody uses it, everybody needs it, and without it, nothing good happens. Go ahead, Carol. I know you want to say something. Go ahead. I know you can't help yourself.
And nobody can make water.
There you go.
we have a finite amount that falls. That's what we got, because the oceans are salt water, and at the moment it's a little. We haven't got a big solution to changing salt water into drinkable water. There are already cities that are in water conflict or have lowering water tables that are going to affect the people much sooner than later. The areas in conflict are tied to transboundary water sources. In other words, rivers that flow from one country to another. And the 5 hotspots are the Nile, the Ganges, Brahmaputra, the Indus River, the Tigris, Euphrates, and the Colorado River. If you've ever seen the reports, you know it looks like a nice big rolling river at the very beginning, but the end of the Colorado River has retreated a lot, leaving much of Mexico without water. And the water tables in the following cities are lowered because of population and lack of conservation. One of the worst is Mexico City. And what happens when the water table drops? The buildings collapse because the earth changes, the quality of the earth changes. And there's not enough moisture in the earth to hold up the buildings because it's turning into dirt and sand. Okay, Mexico City.
Wait. Hold on. Let's not gloss over that, because it sounds like what you're going to just kind of talk about. But I want to get into that for a minute. So,
do you want me to name the cities first, or you want to go?
I'm good.
Okay.
Because what you've said right there, we can work with. So let's look at Mexico City. Mexico City is a fine city for this study. Mexico City is a giant city with 12 million people last time I checked. 12 million people live in Mexico City, and Mexico City draws its water not from the ocean or from a river, but from an aquifer that's underneath the city. This means for millions of years, it rained where Mexico City is. And it rained and it built up underground into what's called an aquifer, basically a large mega million-gallon body of water, and almost like an ocean underwater. And when humans started living there, they drilled down and they were easily able to reach it. There was so much water there. They were easily able to reach it. They pulled it up and they started using it. And because it was easy to reach, more humans came there. That's generally how we work. If we can get water, we can grow food, more of us show up. Well, fast forward 20,000 years, and what you have now is a sprawling metropolis drawing off millions of gallons of water, not per week, not per month, but per day. That aquifer, which was once huge and mighty, is now only able to be reached with advanced technology. That's now tapping that aquifer and reaching the bottom of it for the first time in history. Now you go, well, that seems a little odd. Why would it not fill up again? Well, it wouldn't fill up for a couple of reasons. One of the primary reasons it doesn't fill up is that there's a city on top of it. The city is made of what? Concrete. And what is the one feature we like about concrete that makes it a desirable building material? It's not porous. So you put it down, it lasts, water runs off it, and it flows away. And that's great. We don't have cities sinking into the ground because the earth is squishy and wet. The problem, however, is because it's not porous, we're no longer able to refill the aquifer, which means a place which used to sustain millions of people is slowly becoming unable to do so. We don't capture that water. It's not saved. It's pushed out through sewer systems into the ocean, which is great for getting rid of unnecessary or undesired water. However, it's problematic because it does not go back to the earth, and therefore it leaves the water cycle as we need it to be. We need it to go back into the aquifer so we can use it again. Since we haven't figured this out, I think we figured it out now, but I think we have not found a solution to this problem. This city, and I believe 9 or 10 others, which Carol will probably be able to name, will eventually come across a problem which I believe is called day zero. And when 0 day comes, that will be the day you turn on your tap in Mexico City and nothing comes out. And what that will mean for the foreseeable future is nothing will come out. Not like it'll be a few days where it won't come out. It means nothing will ever again come out of it. 12 million people without water is a problem. How many other cities are there, Carol?
10 others. There may be more, but these are the 10. Yeah.
Can you name
and it creates other problems. It creates infrastructure problems.
Well, yes, because once the aquifer is gone, the earth that was there is no longer being held up and displaced by water. So in addition to Mexico City not having water, it's actually sinking. It is sinking into the aquifer that used to be full of water and now is gone, which means there will be no aquifer in the future once, let's say, the core of Mexico City sinks into the aquifer. That's great because now the water can flow down there again, but it will be hundreds of years, and that's assuming it rained every day and it flowed into the aquifer, but a lot of the aquifer is now filled with rubble from Mexico City, which means it'll never be as good as it was. And that means that area is basically going to become an unsustainable platform if we cannot figure out how to fix this problem.
Yes, and in addition to that, only about 1% of that water is for human consumption directly. The rest of the water is used in production. So any industry that is producing anything that requires water will have to shut down. So it will not only affect the structures, it will also affect the ability of the businesses to run, which will affect the whole economic underpinning of the city. It's a huge problem.
Mexico produces food, tobacco, aerospace chemicals, iron, steel, petroleum mining, vehicles. These all require water to produce in vast amounts. What you said was true. Only 1% of the water that is used in Mexico City is used for human consumption. The rest of it goes into its industry. So when Mexico City sinks into the ground, all of those industries that are sustained by it will cease to exist if they used water from that aquifer.
Correct.
This is a problem because when this happens, it won't just happen for Mexico. It'll happen for lots of other places. And each one of these things will have a catastrophic effect on not just the people, but the society. Where will those 12 million people go? Anybody like to guess?
Well, first they'd have to climb the wall to come north.
There is no wall yet.
I know. I'm kidding.
There's no wall yet. There's nothing stopping them. If that thing, if the aquifer were to empty tomorrow, those 12 million people are going to be looking for someplace to go. And what's the first thing you realize when you have a giant city of 12 million people? If that city goes away, they will spill over into the other towns near them. But will those towns be able to sustain them? No, because those towns are small because they cannot sustain large populations.
Hello.
So then these people spill into these new areas and now become a problem for those new areas. So this becomes a cascading error, something that continues to memories. And so remember when we talked about mass migrations, if you probably, I was on a Friday call, we talked about mass migrations being an issue for the future. Mm-hmm. One of the things that will spur mass migration is unavailability of water. So as large cities lose their infrastructure, people will leave those cities because what do you use water for? You use it to drink, but primarily use it for sewage and removal of wastes. So when a toilet no longer flushes, people will leave. And that becomes a catastrophic problem that will keep cascading until they reach a border. Do you suppose a border will stop them? They have no place to go. They have no place to go back to. A border won't stop. A border won't stop them. No matter what people say, a border won't stop them.
And all those people moving through an area that may have water for the population that exists now get stressed with the new migration. And slowly they will devastate that area. And as they move, it's almost like an army of ants, army of fire ants that eat the vegetation as they go through. It's going to be like that. There's going to be nothing but wasteland as people move through because there's no water to. Go ahead. You want to know the other cities?
Yeah, tell me the other cities so we can be horrified together.
Okay. South Africa. And they actually had a 0 day scare, and they managed to save enough water to push that back. Sao Paulo, Bangalore, Beijing, Cairo, Jakarta, Moscow, and in Moscow, 1/4 of the world's fresh water reserves are in Russia. But the country is plagued by pollution problems caused by the industrial legacy, and their supply of water is dependent on the surface water. So the water that they do get is 35 to 60% unable to meet sanitary standards. Okay, so Istanbul, Mexico City we talked about, London, Tokyo, and Miami. And Miami, in part, is because of all the storms that have hit it, the seawater has polluted the rivers. So what was clear water is now polluted. So no place in the globe is free from the issue of water, and we're going to have to, and maybe we'll get a chance on the call eventually to talk about what kind of planning do you have to envision to somehow redirect the resources and the population so that there isn't mass starvation and death and economic collapse.
The bottom line is it cannot be allowed to happen. That's the bottom line. Imagine the catastrophe of Mexico City, London, and Beijing. Okay? These are three of our largest. They're large, they're industrial, they're manufacturing, and finance. Holy cow. Can we talk about stock market crash? Sure we can. We're talking about a catastrophic event that has nothing to do with anything other than the existence or lack thereof of water. And this is not a faraway event. We're talking 20 years. By the year 2040, some or all of these places will be approaching or counting down from zero to a 0 day. They'll be counting down because basic conservation techniques as we use them today are not enough. And as our weather continues to evolve, it will not be enough. Go ahead, Carol.
Plus there's a guess that sea levels could rise 15 to 20 feet in the same 20 years, which further pollutes any fresh water and starts to create a water world kind of existence. And it's water we can't use.
Well, more importantly, it's water that, as the sea levels rise, unfortunately, I believe the number is about 70% of the human race lives on a coastline. So, if our water levels rose 15 feet, 20 feet, we might find a good portion of the East Coast underwater. A good portion of India underwater. London underwater. I mean all of London, too, because it's mostly flat. Underwater.
Tokyo would go under, too.
Japan. That's right. Good portion of Japan underwater. Again, these are all major industrial places. So now here's a question. Why is it nobody recognizes this, and we have not heard every day about new ways of converting seawater to fresh water and new engineering to capture rainwater? Every raindrop every raindrop is precious. Why have we not heard an ad campaign that says that every raindrop is the most precious natural resource ever and that we are not out here catching them ourselves? Why are there cities that have actually criminalized the collection of water as rain? Anybody care to guess why this is the case? This is the open, hi, everybody, you can share with us moment.
So I hadn't heard about them criminalizing people who catch rain. That's horrifying in itself.
They also criminalize people who go off the grid, if that helps.
Right. Well,
I know you're
I don't know
you're
why
boggled.
I am boggled. I don't boggle easily either. I've been trying to figure out this why is no one investing in turning seawater to fresh water? Like there's got to be the technology for that, and all signs point to the fact that there's actually going to be a market for it too, because if all the other water resources go away. Like, do you know in Los Angeles they have found that the tap water has really high levels of antipsychotic medications in it, and like those have pretty bad side effects. You know what I mean? And
yes,
it's like
do.
if there's enough of that for them to be concerned about it in the drinking water, that's a concern. like why does no one talk about that? You know?
You just answered the question, Lisa. You don't even realize you did.
Oh.
How did she answer the question?
She now I can't remember exactly what she said, but it's about monetizing the resources. Someone's going to get rich by holding the market for water?
Well, someone has already been getting rich. So anybody remember Nestle and South America? There was a great big, I think it might still be going on. I'm old. I can't remember that. But I know there was a great big battle about how Nestle came in and basically bought up the water rights everywhere and then forced people to buy water from them, as an example of the economic engine that sits perhaps behind the entire process of water. Nestle is one of the world's biggest water consumers, as well as users, as well as sellers on the planet. They go from country to country, buying up land, tapping into the local water supply, and then using that water as a natural resource while not paying for it, and then selling it back to the people who live in those areas.
And not let them collect.
And not let them collect that water. Yes, they do.
Yep. So
water, as often as I hate to hear the expression, water has become the new gold. It is blue gold. As a matter of fact, if you do a search for blue gold, you'll find a lot of people call it that already. Water is blue gold. It is the one thing you cannot make artificially. You cannot manufacture it. If I run out of copper for wire, I can make gold wire. I can make iridium wire. Very expensive, but I could do it. But if I don't have water, my cows will not drink Budweiser. They will not. They will not drink a substitute.
Yeah.
I need water, and so water has no replacement element. It has no replacement thing. Without water, industries grind to a halt. Farming grinds to a halt. Agriculture of every kind stops. And right now, we have a culture built on the idea that the world is a sustainable environment as long as we have enough technology to throw at the problem. Well, that's not technically true. Because in the case of water, no technologies that we have created can match the need and the use rate that we currently have for water. Not a one. We can't get it out of the ocean fast enough. We can't distill it from the sky fast enough. And we have not learned how to create capture systems robust enough to harness the billions of gallons that fall from hurricanes. So even though we have storms that are generating crazy amounts of water, nothing we've made so far is strong enough to capture that water and survive the experience. So at this half-hour point, we're now open to interesting questions and diversions. And how do you think we can fix this? What do you think needs to happen for people to look at water as the lifeblood of our world and to begin to address it as the pertinent, world-shattering thing that if we run out of it or have too much of it, too much that's not fresh, that becomes a problem? How do we address this? How do we convince people to take water loss, water use, and water availability as something to be, I think we should address it as much, if not more, than almost any other problem. Because once we run out of water, all our other arguments become moot.
Hi, it's Rod.
That's true. Hi, Rod. How are you doing?
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to answer Thaddeus' question to the extent that I know. I think there's a number of things that we can do. I'm starting to learn that rainwater, instead of being diverted into storm drains, should be put back into your yard. I mean, certain amounts of rain are too much, but, you know, for example, for one house, you could put one downspout out into your garden, and so some of that water then would go back into the aquifers under our homes and help to restore the aquifers, because if it all goes into storm drains, it just goes into the ocean and it's lost. So one of the big problems in the world is depleted aquifers, and that's a really good way to restore it. There's a number of books available, water gardens and all kinds of ways of restoring aquifers that have been printed recently. So that's one thing. The other thing that I know of that does tend to restore water resources is permaculture. And here in Victoria, permaculture is becoming a pretty big thing. Lots of people are very interested in growing their own food. And permaculture, once it's built, does not need a lot of irrigation. It's partly because of the incredible deep mulching that is built into a permaculture garden, and it just works. I don't know enough about it to really describe it, but I know that many people's permaculture gardens take very little irrigation, and they produce incredible food of all kinds. So it's a special technique that doesn't till the soil. It's built on various types of mulches with trenching, with logs buried in the soil, covered up with coffee grinds and newspapers and leaf mulch and cardboard and all kinds of stuff in different levels. And that tends to keep the water from evaporating, because when you till the soil, the water just evaporates like mad. But with all this mulching, it's kept in the soil, and any rain that falls just goes right through all this mulch, and it stays there. It doesn't go away. It doesn't evaporate. And the plants are then planted in this mulch, and then the roots go down very quickly because it's so nutritious for the plants, and it accesses this water. So those are two things that I know of that you can do to restore water resources, and you can do that anywhere. I've seen some incredible permaculture videos about of people restoring deserts to fully functioning farms. It's an absolutely amazing new development, and people are doing it all over the world. I can't think of a guy. There's a guy in Japan that's doing it, and what he does is he takes clay and throws a whole bunch of different seeds into it, mixes it into a ball, and then he walks through his forest and just throws the balls into the forest, and the seeds grow and they produce food, and there's food everywhere throughout this forest that's growing. It's quite remarkable how things can turn around if we have the right kind of insight and knowledge about plants and water and soil. So I think there's a huge amount that could be done here. Anyway, that's about the extent of my knowledge at this point on this stuff.
Permaculture developments are great because they offer the opportunity to have a group of people take an area and say this area should remain natural. Mm-hmm. And then the permaculture sits on top of that and sustains it and offers a place that is not concrete, that can hold water, can feed an aquifer, and over time becomes a strong, sustainable spot inside of many city regions.
Yes.
They themselves are not sufficient to deal with the amount of loss that's taking place from an industrial aspect. So as great as they are, and I do love them, I've seen many of them. As a matter of fact, I've seen the video you're talking about. It's on YouTube if anybody's looking for it. But the problem with permaculture is we are an industrial society. As an industrial society, we have come to rely on industrial manufacturing. Now, I want you to visualize your local supermarket. Visualize it. See it in your mind. Every shelf has something on it, and everything on a shelf was manufactured. not just the substance in the box, but the wrapper that's got that substance, the box that substance is in, how it was manufactured required water. If it was paper, water was used in the creation of paper. If it's plastic, water was used in the gathering of the natural oils, the oil that is turned into plastic. If it's a food, water was either used to grow the food or to feed the animals and water the animals that became the food. So we're looking at an entire supermarket filled with food from one corner to the other, and all of these things required water to use. Now imagine that times 100, and then times 1,000, and then times 10,000, and realize just how many millions of these individual items were produced in any given year and consumed in any given year. And you have to realize that the water use that's taking place, it is not the individuals. It's not you or me. We're not the problem. We are a beneficiary of it, but the problem is our industry, which insists that we make new ways of producing new foods that cost more water and more resources without any understanding and any concern about the externality of water use and water waste at the end of that process. So then my second question is still, how do we convince corporations to participate in some form of conservation or in a means by which the water that they use is reclaimed? For example, some computer companies are now, they use water to rinse their motherboards, they use water to rinse their materials, and then once upon a time that water was just flushed off into the ocean or into the local river and nobody cared. Now they're required to treat that water to make it as clean and as pure as possible before they return it to nature so that it doesn't poison animals and plants downstream. But those places are rare and it's expensive, and companies don't feel it's their problem to solve this. How do we convince them that doing this doesn't just benefit them, it benefits us and them? Because if we die off, they don't have businesses, and if we don't eat their products or buy their products, they soon won't exist anyway.
Yeah,
so how do we convince them of that?
Well, consumers have a lot of power that they don't realize they have.
Then so why aren't they exercising it?
Well, I do see it happening. I see it happening here. A lot of farmers' markets are all over the Victoria area. You can get lots of organic produce anywhere you want. They're growing. It's becoming more popular. Like I say, people are growing their own food. Yeah, I see it happening. I think it is a consumer choice. Consumers wanted it really quick and easy, and they liked the packaging because it was clean. But I remember when everything came in a reusable container, not even a recyclable container. Now everything's recyclable. I wanted things to go back to reusable. You know, that would be a big step in itself. But I also see that it's really nice to just go pick up your vegetables from a farm stand and not have a package with it. You know, and it's hard to do, but it can be done. In my own home, I'm growing more and more stuff all the time. I grow blueberries and raspberries and strawberries and kale and tomatoes and salal, which is a native berry to BC. I'm trying to grow things more and more all the time. So and I have friends that are doing the same thing. So I think it's a state of mind.
So, I completely agree with you, Rod, that there are these changes happening, and there are changes in the mindsets of people, and, there are these isolated pockets where it's happening. I think the problem is that the change isn't happening at the scale in which it needs to happen in order to save the world in 10 to 20 years, which is what we have to do. And And I believe the solution has to be multifaceted, although I'm open to any suggestions that anyone has. I don't pretend to have all the answers at all. But I think it is a combination of getting the stories out there of the solutions that are working. Like the other day I heard some people just discussing on Twitter, wouldn't it be great if, and I think one city might be doing this, but wouldn't it be great if every building in a city had to have a garden on top of that, because somehow the garden helps the air quality, it helps bring in water. It's like they were talking, I should have read it more, but just having green stuff growing on top of buildings is a way to change the entire city.
Sure. Yeah.
But we need to have that happening. We need to have solutions like that happening all over the place. It's not going to change by individual people isn't going to get the change fast enough in order to save us, I think is what I see as the big problem.
Well, it has to start somewhere, and then those people that start thinking like that then, develop political parties that then gain, electoral power, and then they make fundamental changes. And that's what's happening here, at least. Like I said on the Facebook post, we're voting for proportional representation next week. And that's a huge shift. And the Green Party will have, I believe they'll have 10 to 15% of the power. That's a pretty major change. So, and this area of BC and Canada is highly environmentally activated here in Victoria and Vancouver. It's very environmentally aware. So it could be an exception to the rule. So you may be right, it may not be enough change in the short time that we have left. But that's how it happened here. Like it started with Greenpeace when it was formed in the 60s here in Vancouver. So it's always kind of been like that, So I don't know.
All right. We know the tree-loving Canadians will always try to do the right thing. How do we get China, who is starving for money and power and completely trying to replicate the American experience using industry to jumpstart their economy to an epic level, and seemed completely unconcerned with the amount of pollution they're creating and industry they're producing? Have you seen Beijing lately? Oh my God, the sky is like black. It's completely insane. They don't seem to care. They're producing, the Yellow River is now actually yellow. It is filled with toxic chemicals. They don't seem to care at all who's downriver of that. How do we convince them to acknowledge that if they cannot change their ways in short order, there won't be a China for anyone to worry about? There won't be anybody living there. They won't be able to breathe the air. They won't be able to drink the water. And 0 day will come for them too. How do we convince them?
That's really scary.
To do that.
From what I've understood, the only reason that people in the West, such as Victoria or other places, that do get into permaculture or all this stuff is because they've developed the wealth and the knowledge and the skills that came about through capitalism. And we have the excess ability, resources that we can do this stuff now. And China hasn't achieved that level of wealth and knowledge and skills yet, and they're still scrambling for survival. So for them, they're in survival mode, and they're fighting like mad to become wealthy so they can have what we have. And that is a very difficult thing to work with. I don't disagree with you at all. And it's really hard to know because we're the privileged in the world. North America and Europe, we're the privileged, and Japan and Australia. So how do we then say to people in Asia and India, well, you can't have what we have? But they do, because we went through this 100 years ago. We were like that 100 years ago, like China is now. So what do we say to China? That's a really good question. I know I have thought of that myself on occasion, wondering, what the heck do you say to the developing world? You know, Gandhi said it'll take 5 planets to give everybody on the planet what we have in the West, what we take for granted in the West. So that's a really good question. I'm wondering if maybe it's us willing to take a step back and admit that we've made errors and that we have caused a lot of pain and suffering by taking too much, and that maybe there's a middle ground somewhere between where China is at and where we are at, and we can say we don't need all this excess. But I don't know what it's going to take to get to that point. Because
God, I love you guys. You're so idealistic. You want America to admit that it made a mistake by creating the industrial age? You want America to admit that maybe it ravaged the planet for, Britain too. The two of them ravaged the planet for, 80 years nonstop to become juggernauts of incredible capability, and now that you're rich and powerful and have all the nuclear weapons in the world, now you want to tell everybody else, hey, y'all can't do that. It's bad for you. It's bad for all of us. You know what? That's awesome. I would love to see us say it. But honestly, I don't see America apologizing, A. I don't see America recognizing its fault in this, B. And I don't see China accepting it, C. Because China figures, you know what? I've looked at China lately. And where they were madly building 10 years ago, they have cut back a bit. The sky over Beijing isn't as black as it used to be. Matter of fact, they turned off all their factories in their recent, when they had the Olympics, they turned off all the factories, and it was the first time in 10 years that the sky above Beijing was blue. And if you doubt me, I want you to go back, look on the internet, and find the photographs, and you will see that it was incredible. Even the people living there couldn't believe the difference.
Yeah,
so I'm totally with that. I just don't see the developing world accepting it and rationalizing and understanding that everybody's now got to dial it back just a little bit. And you know what, honestly, I don't think it's impossible. I think the world does not need an iPhone 6. It doesn't. And all the resources that go into producing an iPhone 6, they are not necessary. We did not need to spend them. The only reason we spend them is because Apple feels the need to continuously grow and grow and grow and become an immortal vampire that sucks resources out of the earth, destroying everything that it touches until it's $1 trillion company and says, well, I'm $1 trillion company, now I can be a $2 trillion company because, of course, I have $1 trillion. I now will spend even more money to gather more resources. And see, here's the horror of this, and this is the thing I'm gonna leave you with. I'm gonna horrify you one last time. We're building computers that are super intelligent. We're building computers that are smarter and faster and more capable than they've ever been in the history of the world. And they will make our industrial capacity 1,000 times more powerful than it has ever been. But do you want to know the problem with that? The problem with having 1,000 times the industrial capacity that you had before is that we have no need of 1,000 times the industrial capacity that we had before. As a matter of fact, what we need is less industrial capacity. What we need is a change of pace. What we need is a world that says, if you can build it, don't. If it's already in existence, fix it, repair it, reuse it. Don't make anything new unless the thing that you're making that is new is a radical departure from the thing that you made before.
You're talking
the problem
like
is corporation. No, I've always talked like you, sir. Always. I've always believed this. The difference is I live in a nation that doesn't. I live in a nation that believes that consumerism is the way to heaven, and that the more we buy and the more we sell, the more we will have. And the truth of the matter is, no one's counting everything. They're only counting the profit. They're not counting the waste products. They're not counting the externalities. They're not counting the lost lives. They're not counting any of the resource catastrophes that have taken place. They are simply counting the profits. And if we were to tell them, you have to pay for every person that dies from your product, if you have to pay for every tree that falls in the forest from the poisons that your factories produce, if we made them pay for those things, they would not do them, because the price would be greater than their profits. And maybe until we get to the point where we're able to say that, we are going to just have to sit in our toxic soup, breathe our toxic air, wait for a faucet to come on between 2 and 4, because that's the only time there'll be any water in wherever you live. And if you don't get it in that little 2 to 4 window, you don't get it. And that's the future we're looking at. One where we stew in our toxic goo, wait for our supermarket rations to arrive, wait for our 2 hours of water a day where we get 20 gallons and that's all we get. And we have to make do, because no one is willing to admit that we're wrong. No one is willing to admit that profit is an engine that is killing us. Yeah, we look really profitable right up until we ran out of air to breathe and water to drink and animals to eat. We were really profitable.
I have an idea.
Okay, I'm ready.
So part of the problem is that we have too much stuff. We all agree on that. Like, we've got to get the emphasis off of the stuff. And one of the ways that you get the emphasis off of the stuff is you put more emphasis on experiences, right? So we're already seeing a little bit of a shift towards that. Like, Christmas presents used to be all about the stuff. And now, a lot of times people are giving, here's a stay in some place where you could go, or here's an afternoon in the park with your kids, or, I'm seeing that trend, and I'm seeing people talking about that and writing about that, stop spending your money on stuff, spend it on experiences. So what if we created experiences that helped clean up the world, as well as being really fun experiences? And I don't know exactly what this looks like, because I literally only just thought about it right now. But they're experiences that help do environmentally sound things together with communities of people, and they're tons of fun, and they're zero waste types of activities, and people pay for them. So an example might be, I would do this, if I heard about a group of people that was going to plant a whole entire forest over the course of a weekend, and you could go there, you could plant trees, you could sit around campfires, you could meet people, you could learn how to purify water while you were there, you could learn survival skills, you could do rope courses. I don't know what it is. I'd go there.
Stewardship. You're talking about stewardship adventures.
Yeah. That's a great name for it. Stewardship adventures. Exactly. So you're solving a couple of problems at once, right? You're solving the problem of too much stuff, because you're giving people a different thing to spend their money on except stuff. You're solving the problem of getting people to actually do stuff that will help the environment instead of hurt it. And you're solving the problem of getting people together in a community of shared values who get to know each other and can then continue their stewardship after the weekend's over.
There's something like that happens here in Victoria with the school system. It's a thing called a permablitz, and it's organized by the Permaculture Institute here in Victoria. And they go around, they build permaculture gardens for free for elementary schools. And by doing that, they build a permaculture garden, and they teach the kids how to grow food in permaculture. And it's been quite successful. I've gone on a couple of them. Like I said, they're called permablitzes. And they're a lot of fun. You get to meet people, and you learn a lot about growing food. it's something that seems to work. I think that's a great idea, and it could be expanded to many, many, many things.
That's it. It's like it's almost got to be these franchises. You know what I mean? Like these franchises that are all around the country doing this.
It has to happen at the same level and same density as the destruction of our ecosystem. Mm-hmm. We have to be replacing it at the same level, the same effort that we as a niche, as a culture, as a species, destroy our environment. Because if we don't, our destruction will catch up to us. It may take a while. But see, people are of the opinion that natural resources are endless, that there's an endless amount of air, there's an endless amount of water. No, I'm going to tell you a secret about water. All the water that exists on Earth, all the fresh water that exists on Earth, is all the fresh water that has ever existed on Earth. We are drinking water that has been part of the dinosaurs. And we've been drinking water that was part of the Jurassic period and the Cretaceous period and the Devonian era. And from the beginning of time when fresh water first fell out of the sky, that water is still with us. When we destroy water, when we use it carelessly, callously, without vision, we are destroying the only thing that ever sustained us. So we have to protect our environment at the same speed, with the same vigor, and the same zeal that we use it up. That's real talk. And there's no getting around it. So, yeah, stewardship adventures, blitzing, all that, yeah, that's how we have to do it. And we have to convince the people who are using those resources to fund these adventures. They have to pay into it because that's the only way it can afford to be done.
Yep, that's a great idea.
Now, is there anybody else who's been on this call that wants to have something to say before we close up?
Well, I think we should worry about the air. Otherwise, we won't have to worry about the water if we don't do something about the air that keeps us alive, that we're breathing. We're letting things go that is brought to the front, and because there's money involved, as you said before, it's put aside. A lot of that is happening from the fumes of the gasoline and the cars and everything else, and everybody laughs it off like it's nothing.
Don't worry, we're going to get to air.
I think that's more important at this point than the water. The Arctic Circle is melting. All that stuff is melting. They're talking about the East Coast will be at Mississippi River because this whole side will be flooded from what comes down from the Arctic Circle.
We're going to get to air. Don't worry. That's the reason we broke it up into 4 elements. We're going to do air next. Water first.
I'm sorry.
We'll do air. So don't worry. No, that's all right. It's important to know that, yes, without air, yes, you can live 3 or 4 days without water, but you can only live about 3 or 4 minutes without air. So, yes, air is important. Yeah, it's real. But we're talking primarily about water right today. So was there anybody who wanted to say anything that didn't get to say anything about water before we close it up? And we'll probably talk about water again, but right now I wanted to just get an idea of how people feel. How did you feel about water at the end of this? Do you like it more? Do you worry about it more? Is it something you think you can handle? Is there an idea, like Stewardship Adventures became a thing that we could talk about as a way of dealing with water loss and water conservation and ideas and these permaculture gardens, and these are ways we can look at water and ask, what can I do about water, and who do I talk to about water in a way that makes it significant? It can't just be, us little people doing it. It's got to be the big guys too. They've got to recognize the value of water the same way our civilization does. If we didn't have it, everything we do would come to a halt. Literally everything. There's nothing we do on Earth that doesn't use water.
Yeah. Well, is it possible to take the snow that's melting or melt it and somehow build some kind of water plants around that and have the water drain down into our area? Like they're doing it on the West Coast, I think.
Yeah.
of Alaska.
Funny you mention that. There is a guy who created a water fountain, and during the winter, he turns this water fountain on. It's a giant spraying device, and it creates this giant water igloo. And it freezes during the winter, and then come summer, people then drink, it melts, and as it's melting, people gather water from it. But this is one of the ways, as a technology, that someone figured out how to bring water to areas that didn't have it and make it available during the lean seasons when water doesn't fall from the sky. So people are doing all kinds of inventive things. They're just too small. What we need is a bigger, more potent solution. So with that, I'm going to have Carol, if you have anything you want to close with, you got about 2 minutes or about a minute and a half, and so if there's something you want to close with, now's the time.
No, I think we've covered it. We're living in a country that has said they understand that there's climate change and there are going to be resource issues, but since they're coming anyway, this is from our president, since they're coming anyway, we might as well use what we have while we have it. And that's a big hurdle to get over because he's not the only one who thinks that way. So not only do we have to discuss it and maybe come up with a plan, but we have to understand that we're fighting money again. And that always makes it tough because Trump also lifted all the EPA regulations on what you could put into the waterways. So everything is being corrupted without a thought to what it's doing to the population, if they care.
Well, I think that's part of that. I think that's part of the plan, quite frankly, to make us so overwhelmed that it seems like an overwhelming problem, and then we stop trying to solve it. So that's the one thing I'm not going to stop doing. I have 2 quick thoughts, though, because they're not, I understand nothing's big enough yet, but in order to get to those bigger ideas, I'd like to suggest 2 things. One is to continue to post the individual stories in the environmental Facebook group. When you see something cool, just grab the link, throw it into the Facebook group, and don't even worry whether people respond to it right now. Let's just start having a collection of these smaller things, because I think that the understanding the smaller solutions will help us figure out the bigger solutions. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's look at what's working, let's look at what's getting results, and let's try and make it something bigger. And the other thing I would like to do is to start doing like weekly Twitter threads where we talk about some of these things, present these solutions. I think it would be great to do like do a Twitter thread on each of those 4 elements and put some of your facts, put some of the solutions, put some of what we're thinking. I want to get it on record that we are talking about this and we are coming up with solutions. We don't have them yet, but that we are like leading this conversation, not just jumping into it. So those are my closing thoughts.
I posted. I have what I call the initial essay that presupposes why I opted to do this the way I did, and I sent a link to you already. But what I'll do is when I refine the Facebook feed, what group is it going to go in? The environmental group?
Yes.
Okay,
put everything in the environmental group, and then that'll be like a library, and we can sort through it and do other stuff with it later. But just that's like a repository for now.
Right,
I love the way you've structured this into the 4 elements. I think that's brilliant. I think that helps make it easier for people to comprehend and not feel so overwhelmed. So I think that's great.
Well,
okay.
I appreciate everybody that came. I'm glad you all had a good time. I hope you've learned something. I hope that we've made this approachable and understandable. And I look forward to talking to you next week where we will discuss the idea of air and all the things that you need to understand about it and why we don't talk about air more, because it is bigger than you know.
No.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to that, too. Thanks, everyone.
All right. You have a good night.
Take care.